analyses that covers a range of water issues, everything from the Colorado River to tribal water rights to the general stream adjudications. Some of those reports are very nitty-gritty with hundreds of citations, and some are written for different audiences and aren't quite so geeked out. So that's a big part of our work. And another very big part of our work, we think of it as the cornerstone of our work, is the Arizona Water Blueprint, what we're going to talk about today. Here's the link to the Arizona Water Blueprint up in the upper right quadrant of the slide. Don't go to it now, please listen to us, because Susan is going to tell you about all kinds of clever tools and things you can do with the blueprint, which you'll miss if you just go to the blueprint right now. Next slide. So before we get into the actual blueprint, which we'll do very soon, we thought it would be helpful to kind of lay out a little bit about what's going on with water. We could tell, I can see from the comments that many of you in the Slido comments that you're paying attention to the news and can see that water is coming to the forefront as bringing forth very critical issues for the state. But a couple of basic ideas are important to start with. And one of them is that while the big shortage that's in the news these days is about the Colorado River, that is a river system that is suffering from all kinds of impacts that lead to declining flows. And this has serious consequences for Arizona water users. It's important to remember that the Colorado River is not the only water supply for the state of Arizona. In fact, we have relatively diverse sources of water across the state, but we also, we don't treat all of this water as one big bucket that everybody gets to share alike from community to community, tribe to tribe, irrigation to irrigation district. Different entities have different portfolios, different allocations, and different degrees of vulnerability or resilience when it comes to water. In fact, just in the greater Phoenix area, there are dramatic differences from city to city in the vulnerability when it comes to water, particularly as we're facing shortages on the Colorado River. The other important thing to keep in mind when we think about water resources in Arizona is that generally out here in the arid West, groundwater is considered a non-renewable resource. I have a brother who lives in the southern part of New York, and their groundwater is a renewable resource. They get so much precipitation that you can drill a well and just pump away and you will not lower the water table. But that's not true out here. It was decades and decades ago that humans developed powered windmills and became capable pretty rapidly of overdrafting groundwater supplies. And the issue of the overdrafting of groundwater supplies has been one of the biggest ongoing water resilience issues for the state of Arizona and other states in the arid West. But generally, when we think of groundwater, that's water pumped up from wells. When we're thinking about water management and long-term water resilience, we think of groundwater as non-renewable. Taking it out of the ground could be compared with mining or other extraction. Water from surface supplies is comparatively renewable. We may have variations in how much is delivered. We may be looking at long-term decreases in how much will be delivered, as is the case with the Colorado River. But we have a reasonable expectation that some water will be delivered through a period of years. And so for that reason, we think of those resources as renewable. And then finally, this graph and the next one, we can go to the next one, Susan, shows a use of effluent. And it's a kind of misleading graph because it's about how the Department of Water Resources regards an original use of water. But effluent is an increasingly important supply of water. About 93% of water that enters the sanitary treatment system in the Phoenix and Tucson areas is recycled and reused. We're a leader in reuse. And effluent, the reuse of effluent is a super important tool for long-term water resilience for many communities, especially in the arid West. So I also want to point out in this slide that shows you Greater Phoenix's water resources, you can see that we have a bigger percentage from other surface water than is the case statewide, and that's because of the Salt Verde system that's managed by SRP, the Salt River Project. And that's really the reason Phoenix ever was settled and became a city in modern times, because we had this big river system that could deliver water for an agricultural community. And then I also point out, well, we'll go on. So that's just a little bit about kind of big ideas about our water supplies. And let's just take another moment to think about water demand, and go to the next slide, please. So in the state of Arizona, now this is going to change a little bit, but not dramatically, with the shortage this year of a significant amount, 500,000 acre feet of Colorado River water, but still the largest user of water by sector in Arizona is agriculture. And municipalities use only about 21% of, comprise about 21% of total water demand. You'll also see this little segment for industrial water demand, and that's a kind of grab bag of different water uses. The larger water users in the industrial sector are power generation and mines, but it also includes industries that have their own well, that aren't getting water from a municipal provider. So that can be things like dairies, trailer parks, some data centers, but not all of them, and so on. Next slide. And just so you can see, water demand in the greater Phoenix area is a little different. Agriculture is a comparatively smaller amount of demand, and of course, municipal use is a much greater amount of demand, with a percentage for tribal use too. Before we go on to the next slide, I want to point out that in the Phoenix AMA means the Phoenix Active Management Area, and that's one of the areas where groundwater is managed according to a rigorous cap and trade system with stepped up conservation requirements across every sector. And yet the entire demand for the greater Phoenix area, which holds something like 65%, maybe more than that, of the population of Arizona, the entire demand for water is about 2.3 million acre feet per year. And the whole statewide demand currently for water is about 7 million acre feet per year. So you can see that the Phoenix AMA is using less than a third of the water for the whole state, and yet supports somewhere close to 2/3 of the population. Next slide. And we'll just quickly close with some thoughts about what's going to close this little introductory section with some information about what's going on with demand. This is, I think, a really beautiful graphic from the Department of Water Resources that shows trends in demand from the mid-50s to 2017. The dark blue band is agricultural demand, and the lighter blue band that you see is municipal demand. And the little green band is that agriculture or that industrial sector. And this, I think this tells a very impactful story, because if you didn't know better, you might expect that with all the population growth that's occurred in Arizona since the mid-50s, that light blue band would have increased a lot. And it hasn't. It has held fairly steady in spite of quite a lot of population growth. You'll also see that agricultural demand really fell from the 70s into the 90s, and then it pretty much stabilized, and it hasn't dramatically declined since then. And one more, I think we have 2 more slides about demand, but the next slide shows you what's gone on in the greater Phoenix area. Again, this is from 1999 to 2018, but here's an important 20-year period, recent 20-year period, where you can see that while agricultural demand has declined in the greater Phoenix area, central Arizona area, municipal demand has increased, but nowhere near proportional to the growth in population. In the greater Phoenix area, in the last 20 years, or this is in all 3, from Phoenix to Tucson, it's probably even more dramatic in the greater Phoenix area. The population has grown about 45% but water demand has increased only 14%. So this information, which comes from the Department of Water Resources, arguably shows demand maybe even holding pretty steady in terms of municipal demand, the orange stripe, the orange line on the top. And then finally, that all is summed up by the next slide, the Department of Water Resources story here in this interesting visual. This compares growth in the economy as represented in the gray bars with growth in population, the little orange line with the human half figure, and then the changes in water demand statewide from the mid-50s to 2018. And basically what you see is that while the population has grown from 500,000 to 7 million or so, and the economy has grown about 20-fold since the mid-50s, water demand began declining in 1980, and it has continued to decline so that at this point, statewide, we're using slightly less water than we were using in 1957. So that's all to sort of help us think about water issues and how we can use the blueprint as a tool. And I hope that for some of you, some of this information may be a little bit surprising. And the reason I guess I hope you'd be surprised by this is to say that in our work, Susan and I, we're really driven by the desire for folks like you, people who care a lot about this place, about how Arizona grows and how what will be here for future generations. Decisions about water are extremely consequential. Decisions that we make about water supply or water management will have an enormous impact on how we grow. We often encounter people who think that the biggest challenge we face in our state is population growth. And I think you can see from what we've shown here that population growth and water demand have to a large extent been decoupled. And if we're looking for the biggest challenges related to water, we probably wouldn't put population growth as the #1 challenge. And, you know, as I mentioned at the outset, the challenges vary from place to place, community to community, even habitat to habitat. And so the solutions also will vary. And these are the reasons why it's important that people have an opportunity to become engaged, that the information that you need to become engaged is easy to get to. So transparency, accessibility to critical information is really what drives the Water Blueprint Project and what drives Susan and me in our work every day. And with that background, let's go to the next slide. And I think we're now ready to talk about the what is the Arizona Water Blueprint. Oh no, one more thing. And that is when I was talking about all the consequential decisions, I thought it might be helpful for you to know of this list of 5 potential ways of developing more water for different parts of the state, mostly Phoenix to Tucson area. But here are some concepts that are already out there, more or less under discussion, definitely under discussion. Some of them are already on the table. And some of these concepts will have important implications, could be big solutions. And these are the kinds of concepts that Arizonans need to have the chance to become engaged in. So we won't be discussing these particularly today, but I didn't want to leave you with the idea at all that we have a lot of challenges and no solutions. And I'd also wanted to underscore for you that these solutions have legs, and you are, as a person who cares about Arizona in the future, you know, you have a right to find out more about them. We hope the blueprint can be helpful there. So now I'll turn it over to Susan.
And we got a comment or question in the chat saying AF, does AF mean? And it does not mean sometimes what we text maybe, but it means acre foot of water. And
oh yes, sorry.
Sarah likes to give the exact term here. So I'm going to let her roll with that.
I never had actually made that connection, but thanks, Susan. So an acre foot of water is a great volumetric from the old agricultural past, and it's if you had an acre and you had an aquarium that covered that entire acre and filled it with 1 foot of water, that's an acre foot of water. We use it as an ag term because farmers need to think about, if you're growing cotton, you might need 6 feet of water per acre. Per season, you need 6 acre feet of water per acre. In the non-ag world, we can think of it as 325,851 gallons of water, or enough water to serve 3 pretty much up-to-date and efficient homes for a year. So that's another way to think about acre feet of water. I like to think of it as 3 to 4 efficient residences per year. Thank you, Susan.
All right. Let's see. Okay, so I started with the Cal Center in 2018, and Sarah handed me this wonderful project that I've had this opportunity to work on. And this is just the intro of the Arizona Water Blueprint. We wanted to develop a web-based application. And when we say app, I think of it like an app on our phone. It truly is something that we hope anyone can pick up and utilize. Maybe, a few tutorial videos here and there, but truly something that doesn't require a lot of skill. What you'll see on the blueprint are things that you can pick up from various agencies, and you can download some of the data, but it's not all together. So we really wanted to create something that was very integrated. So coming from my background of working with the 3 state agencies that dealt with water, I really knew a lot of the data that was available because I spent a considerable amount of time at each of them, and I was able to have some knowledge going in to help build this project. And we really wanted to build something that was modern, hence the app piece, and then something that would also just continue, that was durable. I mean, we've seen over and over PDF documents that have been created, and maybe you can find them on the website, and maybe you can't, but hopefully that PDF document that you're looking for might even be linked right here in the blueprint. So we wanted to continually Sarah and I are oftentimes meeting with the Governor's Water Council and the committees associated, and we're learning and we're continually adding. This project is very evergreen. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a tour of our website just so you know where to locate things, and then I'll dive in and show you how to utilize the blueprint. So the main piece is our blueprint viewer, that middle piece. So it is really our interactive map. I chose this slide in particular, this screenshot, because this is our newest layer. Again, very evergreen project. We just added this farmland layer. We think it's extremely useful with, like Sarah was saying, the majority of water use in Arizona comes from ag. So we can see what's happening on the ground here. We have 58 map layers to date. So again, it's this massive data hub of all of these different layers that we've pulled together from mainly public available layers. We've created a few on our own, but it's divided into these categories. You can see hydrography, which is really our natural systems, lakes and rivers, streams, watersheds. Then we have flood hazards. Then we have, the human made. You have the infrastructure where you're looking at canals and dams. And then we have habitat, critical habitat, important bird areas. And then what Sarah was just talking about, we have an augmentation concepts layer, which I will show you when we go through on how to utilize the blueprint. And then political and regulatory, boundaries, what like we said, the AMAs, the active management areas, we've got those. We've got irrigation, non-expansion areas, lots of things from, Department of Environmental Quality and Department of Water Resources, those types of boundaries. Also want to bring your attention to the Getting Started that was on the left side of the homepage. The Getting Started is a quick go-to. You can look at the quick start guide or video tutorials, and you can always reference back here. So I think this is an important page to keep in mind. Sarah and I still find ourselves like, you know, wanting to go back and just hone in on a skill on one of the tools. So we still utilize this as well. And so all of our tools, which I will show you a snapshot of, all of them have videos that you can utilize there. And then we also have a story map and app gallery. And we realize that when we put the blueprint together, not everyone is going to want to dive in and search around, put in layers, learn how to utilize it, even though it's easy, I promise. Maybe they wanted to go to a topic that is of interest to them and get all of the narrative and maps and data associated with that topic all in one package. So that is what we've done here. You can see the different topics that we have that we've selected. We worked with over 200 experts when we were developing this project and got input from them and said, what are the important topics that people want to know about? What do you think we should spend our time writing and, you know, narrating this story so that people could understand it and have access to it? And so we came up with many of these. And one of, you know, like Sarah was talking about the Colorado River shortage, you've all heard about. We recently did an explainer on that. I'll show you that. Also, all of the topics that Sarah was just talking about with sources of supply and demand, that can all be found in Arizona's water story. This story map was one of our original story maps. And you can go in, and if you ever wanted to go back and say, oh, you know, what was that she said? It's probably going to be in here. You can probably find the information that you need right here in Arizona's water story. And then we just did the Colorado River shortage explainer. It's a beautiful new story map on really what it means for Arizona and what comes next. So we took pieces like, what does it mean for our pocketbook? What does it mean for growth? What does it mean for conservation? And we tried to answer those questions. We have some maps that are interactive and some really beautiful graphs, which we hope makes it easier for people to understand what it means. And then just lastly, I just wanted to say that in the on our homepage on the navigation bar about data, the about the data has data descriptions and other details. You can see all of the layers listed there. And for those who want to really get into the weeds, you can click the description, that link there that I showed, and you'll see all of our data layers here. You can see the methodology that we use, the description, where we got the data, and you see that red and green column there. That is the use of an API or existing web service, which essentially means that we are getting the data live and updated from another source, and it feeds directly into the blueprint automatically. So it means that our updating of this makes it a heck of a lot easier to keep things updated if we can live link. So I will show you a couple of ideas on how to use the blueprint. I mean, some of them are oversimplified, but it just gives you an idea of how you might utilize some of the layers that are here within. I am guessing, knowing this crowd, that you all know what watershed you're in, but I would definitely also say that there are plenty of people if in Maricopa County or wherever else that definitely don't know what their watershed is. And so we have the watershed layer here, and you can see that I have that selected. What I wanted to also point out on each of these examples is that our pop-ups, we're really pleased with how our pop-ups are looking lately. They have so much information just right in the pop-up. So in addition to having this map of geographic boundaries, there's data inside here, there's links to resources. And so I want to show you a couple of those as well. So within this layer, you can see that, you know, middle Gila watershed. And if you click learn more about Arizona's watersheds, it's going to take you to, I keep saying beautiful, but another beautiful story map that we have created. We did this in partnership with U of A's Project Wet Water Education for Teachers, as well as the Forest Foundation. And it was a fantastic partnership. We were able to utilize a lot of expertise and wisdom and put together this big picture look at healthy forests and what that means for watersheds. We have a piece on the built environment, and then we've got a historical look at fires over time. It's really fun. I should have put it on here, but you can see how fires have grown bigger and more over time. It's a really great resource. And then within there, you know, there's also information to that specific watershed. So if you're interested in your watershed in this story map, you would find that information. And then I know everyone knows who their water provider is, but perhaps you would like to, you have a question from a friend who might want to move to Arizona, and you can, you know, type in the address that they're interested in, and you can pull up, let me tell you, you're going to have, you know, the city of Mesa serve your water. And so within this pop-up, you've got the city of Mesa, you've got some information here that might be of interest to you. But what I think is really great, again, is that you can link. So here we've got view Department of Water Resources public records. And so it'll take you to this, where it has all of the public records associated only with that water provider. And you can really start to search around and see, oh, what's going on really with the water provider that serves your water. So for example, the system water plan, most people would not know, but a system water plan has a drought plan update each year, or is it every 2 years? They're required to submit to the Department of Water Resources a drought plan. I mean, that's something that could be very interesting to many people right around this time with the shortage and all of the water information that's being thrown at them. You know, what is my water provider going to do? So we've got indicators for drought stages, and you've got management measures associated with each of those stages. And then we talked a lot about active management areas, not to belabor the point, but if you're in an active management area, you've got some regulation. Outside of active management areas, there's basically no regulation. You know, there's a lot of pumping of groundwater, and there's little regulation. So you feel a little bit more secure, I should say a lot more secure, living in an active management area. And so we have the active management areas here. And again, the pop-up right here has what this means, why really it's important that you're in an active management area. And we've got 2 links. One of the links takes you right to Department of Water Resources Active Management Areas webpage, where you can get some of that information that Sarah was sharing for the greater Phoenix area. You can get it for all of the active management areas. They have fantastic dashboards that they recently put together. And then you can also link right in that pop-up to the water demand by sector. And so a little bit different view of what we already shared. This is a dashboard that we created. We've got different tabs for the different watersheds. It is interactive. You can click on and all around, and you can see the different sectors and the water demand. And maybe you want to know about the water quality concerns in your area. So I put together this little video, but essentially you would want to look at impaired lakes, streams, rivers, and Superfund sites. So I just put together this video, and you can see the different impairments around the Phoenix area. There's the Verde River, it has arsenic, and just a quick snapshot, mercury and fish tissue there, copper. And then also here's, I'm gonna click on the Superfund sites, and you can get a feel for what Superfund sites are around, and you can zoom in, of course. So just some information on water quality. I wish that we had more water quality information. I wish we had more on groundwater quality, but this is so far what we've got. And then, you know, our groundwater levels declining. We talked about shortage, and with the shortage, there's going to be more groundwater pumping. How did the levels look over time? How much have they decreased? You might be concerned about this. So we created a groundwater level change app, which I think is really useful. So we took the design of the blueprint and created another app that was just focused on groundwater level changes. We had been reading some reports from Department of Water Resources, and there I was reading some about, you know, what was happening in the West Valley and thinking, okay, we have this 200-page report. I do not understand all of the information in here. And I've been in water for a very long time. And so we got on a phone and started connecting with people at the department, and we came up with this really nice app that is much more visual and, again, accessible and transparent. So I made a little video of what you can do with this app. I can try to talk through it. I'm going to zoom into the Wilcox Basin. You can see that the 10-year rate of change is negative 2.8. So it's decreased 2.8 feet on average over 10 years. You can click and get a hydrograph specific to that well. And you can also link to some other well information. You can zoom, you know, scroll around and look at all of the state, but it'll tell you how many wells have been measured, how many have increased, how many have decreased. It's an extremely useful tool. We've put some contextual layers here. So we have land subsidence, for example, what's happening where, you know, too much groundwater has really been extracted and has causing the land to sink in. And it's just a lot of different layers that you might be interested in when you're really considering and thinking about overall health of a basin. There are some other things you need to consider other than just declining or increasing water levels. And then speaking of other things that you need to consider is also depth to groundwater. So what's the depth to groundwater in the area? We have 2 layers on the blueprint that I thought might be of interest to you. One is the groundwater site inventory layer. These are wells that the department goes out and monitors on a routine basis. And you can quickly see right in the pop-up that the depth to water here is 281 feet. You can also see, you can link to the hydrograph specific to that well. So every single well, you have a hydrograph. It shows you over time how that well, what the depth to water has gone over time. And some other useful information here, water use, you've got irrigation here that this well is used for. We also have a wells 55, it's DWR's term, but it's a well registry layer. So all of the wells registered that were installed. So we have filtered this information to only show the install. But what we've done here is we've symbolized based on the date of install, which is interesting if you really dive into it, or if you develop a table, which I'll show you how to do in a second. You can start to sort and see, well, you know, I want to know how many wells were installed before my town was incorporated. That was actually a live example that happened recently in Paradise Valley. And we were able to sort the information based on the data that was in the blueprint. So if you click the detail, you can get this information directly linked for every single well to the Department of Water Resources. And you can get information that, you know, ownership, the well depth at construction, lots of cool different information on the tabs there. And then also, I can't believe our GIS tech was able to do this, but he also linked all of the image records. So, you know, DWR has this massive set of image records, and every single well is linked to these, you know, many times old documents that you can go through. Just a real life example of something that's currently happening, because we talked about the advantage of being in an active management area. There is a campaign right now to create active management areas in the Douglas and Wilcox groundwater basins. And so we were able to help this group that's running the campaign show them how to utilize the blueprint and groundwater level change app to communicate to the people that might be interested in factual information. Here's what's happening in your basin, because they need 10% of those people that live in those boundaries to sign a petition so that it can go to an election, so that they can vote whether or not to make their area an active management area. And then the other thing that you might be interested in is there a 100-year water supply where I am? And so we have two layers here, unfortunately. I wish there were only one, but we have two layers here. One is if you're a designated water provider, that means the whole service area of that water provider has been designated as having a 100-year water supply. That means they have physical availability of water to meet the 100-year, for 100 years to meet the demand. They also have to show financial capability and that there's suitable water quality. So there's that layer. And if you're in one of these, you know, yay, you have the guaranteed 100-year water supply until, anyway, they redesignate every 10 years, but nonetheless, this is a very good resource to have. And then also the other layer that you'd want to consider is the water supply determinations. So with this one, there's a little bit more depth to it. There's this legend over here, which gets into more information about exactly what that color means. But the good news is that if you click in the pop-up, it has all of the information right there. So it tells you, you know, this is what it means if there's a certificate. This is what it means if there's an adequate or an assured. And just for those who might want to know, the adequate water supply program happens outside of the active management areas, and the assured happens inside. But we can talk more about that if you're interested. Don't want to geek out too much. You know, you may want to explore an area. So this video shows an area. We have the Salt River Corridor here. Just going to play this video. You can zoom in. It's fun to click on the different layers and explore around. You've got dams, you've got rivers and streams, important bird areas. What does the land ownership look like? Who are the municipalities involved? Maybe you're thinking about partnerships that you want to build. Just a useful piece of information. I think wastewater treatment plants were on here too. Yeah. And here's the layer on critical habitat. I already had showed you, but this is showing rivers and streams, impairments, and critical habitat in the area. And then current and historic fires, we have both of those. And much to my surprise yesterday when I was putting this together, I clicked on this one over here, Sonoran Desert, and it said Freeman Fire, and it was discovered yesterday. And I said, wow, that shows you how up to date our blueprint is. That was very exciting. And you may recall, you know, as far as the historic fires go, you may recall the devastation that happened with the Rodeo Chedeschi fire in 2002. But this is nice. It's also nice to just compare, you know, where are things happening again and again, and it's interesting to look at. And augmentation concepts. So we gave you a little bit of background on augmentation. It's been talked about a lot recently, and we have a layer just for that. You can click on the layer, you can get some bullets about what that augmentation project might look like. And then if you click more information in the pop-up, you get a link to our story map, and our story map has a lot of detailed information. Sarah, you said how many projects are in here? I meant to look it up. 26 or something.
I think it's more like 18, but it's a lot.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we have all of the projects, but I think the great thing about this is I feel like it's a quick-ish snapshot on cost benefit almost. I mean, it lays out all of the hurdles, the challenges to the project, who's going to benefit, what the yield of the project is. And it's a really great resource to go and learn about some of the proposals. Now, this actually, some more projects have been proposed since we put this together, so we still need to even put more on, and you know, things come up all the time as possible projects, so we do need to do, but these were the ones that were considered. Yeah, I mean, they're the top projects that have been considered. And I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I just want to say links to resources. We do a lot of linking to other, you've heard me say it, but agencies. We have a lot more. Department of Environmental Quality. We have SRP. SRP supplied us with these gorgeous images. Like this is Roosevelt Dam here. And then we also have videos for all of the dams in their service area where you can sort of fly over and see what's happening on the ground. DEQ has this wonderful dashboard for each of the counties. And then we also have links to Central Arizona Project. We have links to other agencies, organizations, story maps. You can see SRP and CAP there. This is a beautiful story map that the Audubon put together on important bird areas. And if you get lost with some of the terms, which would be no surprise, because if you're not used to the lingo, sometimes it's, you're like, what does that layer mean? I want to make you aware that there is a glossary in here. There's the glossary on our website, but also if you click the I, which is the about button on the viewer, and you click the glossary, you'll get this, which defines all the terms. So I just want to let you know that there are resources within to help you understand. Oh no, I'm really running out of time. Let's see. Yeah, I think actually I probably should stop for questions, but I just, there's a lot of cool tools that you can use. You can see data visualizations. You can put two layers together and you can swipe on and off. You can see direct correlations, how things relate to one another. Just there's too much fun stuff, I guess. And then you can use the select tool. You can count up how many, this one is wastewater treatment plant, how many wastewater treatment plants are in a certain area by using the select tool. And I actually will let this one roll really quick, because the one thing I did say that I was going to tell you all about is I love this feature. So if you click on and you say you want to view the data in an attribute table, you are able to get a table that pops up here. But the cool thing is that you can export it to Excel. So you can do this with every single layer that we have. So anything that's of interest to you, you can you can export to Excel and, do whatever you want to with the data, filter it, sort it, how you see fit. And then our share feature. So if there's something that you want to capture, you can actually say, remember my layers, remember my current map extent, and say, copy this link preview here and send it to anyone you want. So I think that's a really, really great feature that can be utilized if you want to talk to somebody and you want to show them and you want to email about it. It's a really nice feature. And if you get lost, again, I'm reiterating that we have these wonderful video tutorials available. And I think we can probably stop there for questions. We did have some fun polling questions, but
why don't we see if there are some questions, and then if people are quiet, we could go to your polls if you want.
I love it. Let's do it.
So I think no worries. So I'm peeking at the chat if anyone wants to throw a question there, or that might be the best thing. You could try to unmute, but I did mute a few people, so you might not be able to unmute. But yeah, please, let's open up for questions if anyone has it. So either the chat or you could ask.
This is working. Hey there, I wasn't able to figure out my sound earlier. Sorry about that, but I wanted to ask, I worked for Oak Creek Watershed Council, and I was taking water quality measurements on Oak Creek for the last 3 summers. And that data was going directly into an ADEQ form. And so that should have been populated to ADEQ's website automatically. Then that data should be populated onto this blueprint as well.
So the data I think that you're submitting to DEQ actually goes into their assessment. And then what we use on our blueprint is the information from the assessment. So if it's assessed as impaired, it would pull up here. And then we also have a link to the assessment. So, they could potentially find it through that, but it's not right on there unless they link out.
Well, this is like the greatest thing I've literally ever seen in my entire life. So thank you so much.
I love it.
Wait to share this with every single human being I've ever met.
Yay.
So yeah, your GIS person has done a phenomenal job. I'm so excited to just play around later.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for that comment. And you totally made our week. But I would also say, as you're playing around with it and you want to give us a holler if there's something that you'd want to see. That was one of our polling questions. You know, we're always open to feedback, especially if we hear something again and again, we love to incorporate it. So do let us know as you explore.
Okay, thank you.
I do see a question from Julie. She asked, how receptive have people been to lowering water usages when asked?
Your favorite thing, Sarah, it's all you.
Don't get me started. Well, I think it's an interesting question. And I'm kind of curious. Well, here's the thing that we encounter all the time. There is a sort of assumption that we all need to be conserving water as much as possible, and that's some kind of important solution. And it is good to conserve water. It's good because it reinforces for us how, what the precious resource that water is. Pardon me. But conserving water often doesn't have the outcome that people who are working hard to conserve water want it to have. It doesn't necessarily result in water being available for future generations. It almost never results in water being left in a habitat here in central Arizona, different in different places. And so unless conservation is tied to an outcome, it's hard to support pushing conservation. In most cities, conservation helps the city by making sure that there's extra water for more growth. And that's typically what happens, that as people use less water, the cities are able to then stretch their water supplies to support more growth. In a larger system, like a shared system like CAP water, the conservation by high priority users makes that water that they saved immediately available for lower priority users who might be shorted. So conservation is complicated, and it isn't necessarily going to have the effects that people who want conservation to happen to have. And the other part of it, the other piece of this is that we're looking this year at a shortage of water on the Colorado River. That shortage is going to affect the lowest priority users on the CAP system, who are farmers in Pinal County. They gave up their rights to water some time ago in exchange for subsidies to be able to use the CAP water. Cities in Arizona so Colorado River water is 36% of the state's water supply. It's about 36% of cities' water supply. Cities' total water supplies Colorado River only comprises about 40% of total water supply. So trying to conserve, let's say we try to conserve 20% of 40% of 40%, you see does not have a dramatic impact. It helps, it's good. Lots of cities want conservation to happen, but it isn't going, urban conservation particularly is not going to be the ticket out of the Colorado River challenges that we're facing as a state. And very often conservation by municipal users has outcomes that those people who are doing that conservation don't necessarily want. So that's lots of people are very receptive to it. And by the way, we've had a steady decline for a couple of decades now in reduction in per capita water use. It's been going down 2 to 3% per year for the last 20 years or so. So that must indicate that to some extent people are receptive to water conservation.
Yeah, and I would just add too that, most of the cities go for this term, the culture of conservation. And I really do think that for many that has worked out well. I mean, City of Phoenix will show you examples. And I think that was one of our questions in the chat about reduction of turf. I mean, there is a dramatic decrease in the amount of green grass in Phoenix. And that's because people are really understanding that they want to use the resource efficiently. And they just, they know we live in a arid area. So I think that that's one thing, and I would just also add that, the other with cities, I mean, it's exactly what Sarah said, but it really ultimately gives each of the, city, if you're in a city water provider, it gives them flexibility to do other things.
Yeah.
So.
Or to save money on having to acquire new water supply, or reduces wear and tear on infrastructure. So I don't want to be, I don't want it to sound like I think conservation isn't good. It is good, but it isn't the big solution that a lot of people hope it is, especially at the urban scale. And it often has the outcome of making room for new demand. And so you're not really getting where you want to go if what you do is have more users move in and be, and sort of also need water and face shortages with more demand than you had before.
Take a peek at the Colorado River Explainer, the story map, because we talk specifically about this, and it's very succinct and really, I think it does a fantastic job of explaining exactly what Sarah said. So if you're curious and want to, go back and think about it, I think that's a really great resource about conservation on the Colorado River.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. It's really interesting to learn that it's more complicated.
It is.
Yeah. Well,
that's why we did it. I just want to say, Julie, I appreciate that comment. I mean, the reason we felt it was important to start putting this, making water information transparent is so that people can find out these things and be engaged in a very meaningful way in the big water decisions that are coming up for our state.
Thank you so much. I do want to have us kind of sum up, just because it's about 6:30 and I know people have other stuff, including you guys. One last question I had, speaking to what Sarah just said, that maybe we can end on sort of an active note, is if you guys have any suggestions for how people can get involved with those decision-making processes. I know there are definitely a mix of folks here, some who are involved in strategic planning, but some who may not be. So I don't know if you have any suggestions for that as maybe a last point.
Well, there are lots of different entry points for getting involved with water. I think an important one is if you live in a city, which is your water provider, that's a really good place to start. Cities can be super effective and innovative in what they do with water, and their decisions have huge impact because, they often have a kind of cascading effect on neighboring cities. Phoenix has a citizens water, I don't know what it's called, but a kind of committee going. Other cities do. Scottsdale has a water academy, which is a great place to get started. I would start by contacting, if you live in a city, contact your city water department. On the state level, there is a lot going on in developing the plans for the groundwater management areas, the active management areas. And so you can go to the Department of Water Resources website and find out about the different groups that are meeting to talk about what should be the big, the broad outlines of the water management in the next 10 to 50 years in the state. So that's a good place, those active management area meetings. And there's another big committee. There's a group called the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council. Again, that's it's managed by the Department of Water Resources. And there are different committees that are meeting to discuss the big water issues. And that's another good place to plug in.
And I put in the chat also AMWA. Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, they have fantastic blogs. So I just wanted to say, I know it's not really an action, but really great information that comes out each week. And they have a lot of good resources too.
Thank you. I was going to say it is hard to keep up with that stuff. So that's a great resource. And if anyone's curious, Susan did put that in the chat, as she said. So I want to thank you guys so much. This was really great.